very happy to be joined by a great man, a friend called Bob Smeaton. He is, where do I start with this, man? He's been an actor, a writer, a director, a producer. He's a double Grammy Award winner. He's a 3 times Emmy-nominated director of music and arts documentary. He's a musician, he's a songwriter. He's worked with artists like the Beatles, Elton John, The Who, Pink Floyd, The Doors, Queen, Nirvana, Mark Knopfler, the Spice Girls, and Jimi Bloody Hendrix. Bob Smeaton, how the hell are you, mate?
I'm doing great, Ciaran. I'm here in London, England, and you're there in Sydney, Australia. It's a long way away, but we feel as though we're sort of together in spirit.
We are, my friend. We are. Well, let's just start, because that is one hell of a CV, my friend. And I knew you've been involved in the music industry a long, long time. You were born in Newcastle upon Tyne, I believe.
Yeah.
And
Newcastle upon Tyne, north of England.
North of England. Now, how did all of this this career start for you? Was it music?
Well, I think, when I was about 15, 16, I, like most kids such as me from a working class background, who, thought, well, what do you do, when you leave school? So normally, back up in Newcastle, it's either the shipyards or the pit or, some sort of factory work. And there wasn't the sort of outlet then that there is now for to go and work in film and television. So you go to, say, the people at school and they say, what would you like to do after you leave school? And you say, I actually said I would like to be either an actor or a footballer or a singer in a group. And they literally said, okay, there's your application form for the shipyards. So that's what I did. And it was like, this wasn't part of the plan. I didn't plan to work in the shipyards. Plus also, my father, also called Bob Smeaton, who's now dead, he'd worked in the shipyards and used to always say, it's a terrible job. And he, was a welder, right? So I went and, I went and had an audition or an interview for to work at Swan Hunter Shipyards, who were a massive, really big, they were a really big industry on the River Tyne. Yeah. So I went there. So I met the guy at Swan Hunters and he said, so what would you like to do? And I says, well, what could I do? And he says, well, you could be a draftsman or this or that, all these different jobs. And I didn't know what most of those jobs were, but right at the bottom of this long list, it said welder. And I knew what welders did because my dad, he was a welder.
Yeah. I
hated metalwork at school. I never liked, I wasn't into woodwork. I wasn't into metalwork. I could write, okay, I was good at English and I was good at like art in the sort of artistic stuff. And the guy said, well, you've got good qualifications here, so why don't you become a draftsman and work in the draftsman's area? And I said, well, I have to wear a tie for to come to work. And the guy said, yes. I said, I don't want to be in a job where I've got to come to work wearing a collar and a tie.
Wow.
And I said, I'll be a welder. So I became a welder. And it was, the crack, that was great because the guys that I worked with, they were all, same age. Everybody was the same age. All guys, no women. Yeah. So there with all these blokes. But after about, 6 months, I realized I hated welding.
Yeah.
Because one, it's bad for your health. Now, at the time, I was in a band called Heartbreaker. We were playing blues, like stuff by Free, Led Zeppelin, Deep Purple, all the normal sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And we were playing a few gigs, me and 4 other guys, and we were quite a good local band, but we weren't really going to go anywhere. I think one of the main reasons was I was a singer in the group, and I used to jump around a lot. I wasn't the greatest singer. Now, I was good on stage. I liked, I used to jump around so people wouldn't hear if I was singing any bad notes. That was my distraction technique.
Yeah, you had the stagecraft down, but maybe you weren't in tune all the time.
I had the stagecraft down, but maybe I wasn't in tune all the time. Exactly. So we were a good band, and then I realized that the group could be my way out of the shipyards. I knew that I wanted to do more from my life than work in the shipyards. I
Yeah.
was like, at the time I was 18, 19, and I thought there's got to be more to life than this.
Yes.
At the time, 1977, punk rock happened.
Wow.
And I thought to myself, hang on a minute, the guys, all the groups that I used to listen to, like Zeppelin, Free, the Stones, the Who, they were all older guys.
Yeah.
And when I saw them on stage, they were like gods.
Yeah.
You could never picture yourself being up there. I
Yeah.
was never going to be Robert Plant.
Yeah.
I saw the Clash and I saw Joe Strummer, and I thought, there's a guy my age, not the greatest singer in the world.
Yeah.
I could be Joe Strummer. I
Yeah.
could never be Robert Plant or Paul Rodgers, any of those guys. So then the band that I was in, Heartbreaker, we caught the new wave bug. Our songs changed, that it became shorter. I could sing the songs a lot better. Suddenly I went from, we went from writing songs about girlfriends, etc., to
Yeah.
writing songs about how shit work was.
Yeah.
Now we were writing songs about our situation,
Yeah.
which was a punk rock ethos. You wrote about what you knew. I was writing about working in the shipyards, hating it. Suddenly we became a good new wave rock band. Then we started to get interest from the record companies, and we're just about to sign a publishing deal, which meant that would get some cash, and I thought, okay, this could be my passport out of the shipyards. One day I turned up at Swan Hunter Shipyards. Now there was a situation where if you got to work late, if you were late, 5 minutes late, they'd close the gate. So you couldn't get into the building. You couldn't get into the shipyards. They'd keep you locked outside for 15 minutes, and then they would open the gate. And at your wages at the end of the week, you got paid weekly then, and you got a pay packet that had your money in, cash, not check. I didn't have a bank account.
Wow.
So if you were late more than 3 times in any month, you would get suspended, where you had to stay away from work for, 2 or 3 days, but you wouldn't get paid any money. So I'd been late 4 times. I was late all the time because I'd played gigs in the evenings, so I couldn't get out of bed, and I would get late. So one of these days I turned up, they locked the gate. Oh shit, I'm going to get docked money again. I couldn't afford not to get my wages.
Yeah.
So I goes in, and you had to clock in. So there was a timekeeper. So he handed me this white envelope, and I thought this was another letter which was going to say, you're suspended again. I opened up the letter, and it said they were looking for volunteers to be made redundant.
Wow.
And they would pay you, I think it was about £1,500
Wow.
to be made redundant. So they'll pay you to leave the shipyards. I thought, I cannot believe this, that they're actually paying me to leave. And also I thought, what am I going to do? So I went round and saw some of my mates, and what they'd done is they'd given the letters to the guys who were bad timekeepers. And I thought, if I don't leave, there was a good chance I would have got fired anyway, because I wasn't into it. I was like, falling asleep I'd sleep in the toilets, anything. I was too tired.
Yeah.
So I went and saw my gaffer, who was the guy in charge. And I said, look, I've got this letter. What should I do? And he said, Bob, take it, because if you don't, there's a good chance that you get sacked, that they fire you.
Yeah.
He says, so it's your chance. And I thought, hang on a minute, the stars are aligning here.
Yeah, they're
The
doing
band was starting to sort of get some traction. I had possibly a publishing deal, which meant we'd get some cash. And I thought, I'm going to take it. So I went and I said, right, I'm going to be made redundant. And within 4 weeks, I'd left the shipyards. And so I thought, right, I haven't got a job now. The band became my job. And eventually, that motivation, we worked really hard, and we got a bigger audience. We got record company interest, and we signed a record deal. We signed to, Virgin Records, Richard Branson's label. So I was out with the shipyards, and I was doing what I wanted to do. And it was the best decision I ever made. That was the springboard to everything else. Everything else, and I cannot overemphasize being in a situation that you want to get out of is great motivation to get you into a situation that you want to get into.
Yeah.
And that's what happened. You know, like if I had worked in the shipyards and if I'd worked, say, in the draftsman's area where it was really comfortable, like, and I liked it, I would have still been there.
Yeah.
You know, I would have went down that road.
Yeah.
Because I didn't like the situation. I thought I can either live for Friday nights, which was going out, going to see bands, getting drunk, and dreading Monday morning. But I thought, I want to do something that I really enjoy.
Fantastic.
And that is what I've done. I've been really lucky. That's what I've done since I left the shipyards. Every job I've done something which I've really, really enjoyed. And I think that's a great way, you know, for to live your life. If you can do something that you enjoy, you know, you're not going to enjoy it 100% of the time. There's going to be times when it gets you down, when you think, oh God, this is really hard work. Not that I mind hard work, or it's not going your way. But, you know, to have been in something that's really shit, you can always look back and say, hang on a minute, you know, you're getting a bit, you know, you're complaining a bit here. Remember 5 years ago when you were in the shipyards?
Shipyard. Yeah.
Remember the shipyards, you know, getting up at 6:30 in the morning on a cold Newcastle, it's raining. I've got my great coat on, walking up the road to get the bus, you know. So that was it, you know.
I can totally, what's the word I'm looking for? There's a similarity in our both our stories from working class areas. My father was in construction. I actually worked in welding, believe it or not, as well at one point when I was 15, 16. I left school. But I remember there's so many sort of similarities you're talking about there. And also the work ethic. When you've done a real job and you have to get up at 5 or 6 in the morning and stand there and do the long days, day after day, that sort of education, if you want, of what it takes to do real hard graft, you can take that sort of energy and that sort of, it springboards you into something. So when you're doing something like music, which you obviously were good at, and the band were now signed, that sort of work ethic that you was instilled in you from, it probably was doing you, taking that job very, very young was probably doing you a very good favor. It was a massive education.
Oh yeah, it was, definitely.
Well,
But I think the thing is that now, you know, now if I get a bit grumpy and a bit down, because, you know, I've been very lucky, you know, if I've got to fly to Los Angeles and I've got to, you know, jump off an airplane, you feel tired, you got to get yourself up, you got to go and film somebody, you know, no matter how tough it gets, it's been tougher. You know, it's like, you know, going to interview, you know, Elton John and feeling a little bit, tired and a bit grumpy is nothing compared to getting up and going, putting your, you know, welding mask on, going in the double bottoms of the ship and welding. So whenever I get a little bit, you know, complaining, I think, you know, remember where you came from. You know, it could be a lot tougher. Yeah.
Well, let me. How did obviously signed the band signed to Virgin Records? The band was called White Heat. Is that correct? Was there a point? So it changed from the Heartbreakers to White Heat.
Yeah. We were called Heartbreaker, and we were a really good band, and we're a 4-piece band. And then another guy joined the band who was a really, really good songwriter, and that was just before the whole new wave thing happened. So Heartbreaker were basically a blues rock band, and we knew that, you know, two things happened. We went from a 4-piece band to being a 5-piece band. The music that we were playing changed. You know, we still had, you know, a rocky element, but the songs became shorter. Not only did the songs become shorter, my hair went from that length to what it is there to what it is now. So it seemed the perfect time to change the name of the band. And the reason why we called ourselves White Heat, we said that it was because of the Velvet Underground song, White Light, White Heat. It wasn't that. It was because I was a big fan of James Cagney. And James Cagney, the actor, had a film called White Heat. I didn't suggest the name. The name was suggested by the guy who played drums in the band. He said, how about White Heat? And I thought, oh yeah, I love James Cagney. But we tell people that we called ourselves White Heat because of the Lou Reed Velvet Underground song, because it sounded a bit punk rock, but it was because I loved James Cagney. So we became White Heat, and it was because we're a different band. So we changed the name. Yeah.
So White Heat, how long did, so obviously Virgin Records, you released a one album, was that correct? And there was a couple of singles that had you did taste a little bit of success with the touring and what, the band move to London, or what was the transition from the band out of Newcastle?
Yeah, what happened was we didn't move. One of the big mistakes, one of the things that we didn't do, which is something which I've learned, subsequently, and you have learned the same thing. We were in Newcastle, which is like 300 miles away from London. London at the time, and it still is, maybe not so much now, thanks to the, things like this, the internet, etc. London was only 300 miles away from Newcastle. In 1978, 79, 80, it could have been 3 million miles away.
Yeah.
You were so far removed from what was happening. If you wanted for it to be seen by the music press, you generally had to be playing in London. If you wanted to be seen by the record companies, you generally had to be in London. But we decided we were going to stay in Newcastle and get the record companies and the guys from the music press to come to us. And they did. We had people from Virgin Records, A&M Records, CBS Records. They would come to Newcastle and see us playing in front of our home crowd. We had a good following, right? So people would come along, they'd see the band, they'd see, we'd be playing to like 800 people in clubs in Newcastle. And the people from the record company would come up and they would see the reaction that we got from the crowd. And they thought, hang on, if we can transfer this on a bigger scale, White Heat could be a successful band. So we stayed in Newcastle until we got signed. What we should have done when we got signed was we should have all moved to London and stayed there to consolidate that success. We played the Marquee Club, which is a famous venue where everybody played. The Rolling Stones, The Who, everybody played there. It was one of those stepping stones gigs. We had a Tuesday night residency. We'd drive down in the van with all our gear, play at the Marquee Club, then we'd pack our gear, then drive back to Newcastle. Wow. We should have been staying there where we recorded the album, part of it at the Townhouse Studios on Goldhawk Road in London, where the Jam, the Jam were in there at the time, Phil Collins, they were all in the same studio. The difference being that when we'd finished, we packed the van and go back to Newcastle. We should have stayed in London, but we all had girlfriends then. Guys were starting to think about getting married. So there was a pull between we're either going to make it as a band or we're going to, because you know yourself, you've got to put a lot of things on hold when you're in a rock and roll band, because you've got to give it 100%. That's why if you haven't, I firmly believe that if you haven't became really big by the time you're 30 at the latest, you're not going to become the Rolling Stones. I was convinced we were going to be the Rolling Stones. Now you can still make, a great living after that. I've done what I do now through the music. You're the same, you can still, but you're never going to be, if you haven't made it like onto, the big stages and Top of the Pops and, the big music shows, by the time you're late 20s, you're not going to become Ed Sheeran. It's a young man's business. We missed the boat by not being in London full time and capitalizing. So, as what happens with, lots of bands, Virgin was signing new groups all the time. Simple Minds that signed them, and Simple Minds became Virgin's band that they were going to put their energy into.
All the resources and the push was into Simple Minds
rather than White Heat. So we decided, we're not going to, the band, we used to always work under the assumption that if we couldn't be in the Premier League of bands, we didn't want to be in the lower echelons. It was either the Rolling Stones or nothing. We weren't going to be the Rolling Stones. So we,
you all just got together and went, that's it, we've had enough, we're not doing this anymore.
What we did we had a farewell concert. We were really smart. We played a farewell concert at Newcastle Mayfair, which is the big music venue in Newcastle. So it held like 2,500 people. We played a farewell gig there, and we sold it out. We were the only band from Newcastle at the time, and I think probably still now, who sold out that venue without having a record in the charts.
Wow.
And we were really, really, we sold out the venue, and we had a television program, local television, again, in the Northeast, made about the band.
Wow.
When we were breaking up. So, so we did it and went out in a blaze of glory, and we got back together in different sort of lineups, and we played around. But YT was the time when we had all the bits in place, but we didn't quite take it up that next level. And, so we all still became, we all still stayed friends, but then some of us went off in different directions.
So the band have split up, or everyone's went in different directions. What was your next move? How did you, because your career from then on paper now, just with the documentary and the being a producer, a director, a writer, an actor, you're obviously still attracted to the entertainment world. What was the next move after the band?
I think that, music runs through my life. It's like that seam of coal, it's like it runs through it. So I thought, right, suddenly my big fear has always been, and I think it's the same for you, anyone who's got that drive, my big fear is having nothing to do.
Yeah.
And also, I was in Newcastle, so I'd appeared on television, so I became a TV presenter, which I didn't really like. I sort of liked it for a short period of time. And I did a bunch of acting, I did some television stuff, I did some theatre stuff. But as much as it was great and it earned me a few quid, it didn't give me the buzz that being in a band did. It didn't have that spontaneity. It felt like it was, rehearsed. Sitting in front of I was, when I was in my, late 20s, I was a good looking guy, right? Yeah. And I had a bit of fame on a small scale in Newcastle. Yeah. So I would walk down the street and people would come up to me and say, "Hey, Bob, what happened to the band? What are you doing now?" And I always had to have something to tell them what I was doing. So it was like, "Oh, I'm a TV presenter. I'm doing something. I'm doing a bit of acting now. I'm doing something." And then there was a period where I wasn't doing anything. It was scary. I thought, one, I'm not earning any money. What can I do? I've got to utilize what I'm good at, which was, I could talk a lot. I could tell a story through writing songs. And I was quite funny. I make people laugh, like you can, and I think we're similar. We've got similar sort of energies that would tend to be up. I always want to feel as though there's always an element of entertaining. Not showing off, but you want to be able to tell a story. You want to give people, you can do this. You want to be able to lift people up, which is what directing is, really, telling people that we can do this. So anyway, so I had this period where I wasn't doing anything. Now there was a guy, again, who had made videos for the band, who had his own production company, a guy called Jeff Onefour. And Jeff and I were really, really close friends. And he had been a director on a big music program, which was shown in the UK called The Tube. So he knew all these musicians. So I started working with Jeff, not on The Tube, but on when Jeff would go and do, music documentaries or music films, I would go along as the director's assistant, which basically meant I would make the tea and I would make Jeff laugh. I would hang out and I would be like, "Oh, Jeff," and I would be this and that, and I would listen to Jeff's stories. So, from that, and it was music. So if we were going to make a video about, say, the Stone Roses, Jeff would say, "Who are the Stone Roses?" And I'd say, "Oh, they're a band from Manchester. They're great," because I was into the music. Yeah. And I would go along, so we'd meet the band, and I would be able to talk the talk. Yeah. I'd say, "God, I love that guitar sound, and I love that song." Yeah. Jeff was into music, but he'd never been in a band. He didn't know. If if you get your Fender Stratocaster out and you get your Gibson Les Paul out, and I cannot see you, and you play a chord, I can say you're playing it on the Stratocaster. You're playing it on the Les Paul. So I could talk the talk, you know, I knew what happened. And then through that, you know, so we got involved, I would work with like Jeff. And then moving forward, I worked on a whole bunch of things with Jeff. And then he got a job, the biggest job in rock and roll at the time, which was making a documentary about the Beatles.
Wow.
And he said, look, you know, I'm going to get you on board. And at the time I wasn't working, so I wasn't earning any money.
Wow.
And I thought, great. And I thought, right, here's an opportunity here. You know, I was going to be Jeff's assistant. So I came on board as director's assistant. Then the role of director's assistant became assistant director. So I wasn't just making the tea and making this guy laugh. I was now, like, if we were going to interview Paul McCartney, we'd say, who's going to set the questions? And I'd say, oh, I can do it. So I would read books on the Beatles and I would set the questions. So I was getting more and more involved in production, in all the time, seeing what was going on, learning. And I thought, again, this is an opportunity. I'm going to grab it with both hands. And I did. I worked really, really hard, you know, and also I would get up at 7 o'clock in the morning. I would work, no bullshit. I would work 18-hour days.
Wow.
Because again, it comes back to this thing. I was enjoying it. I was loving what I was doing. It was hard. There was a lot of pressure, but I was loving it. I was doing something which I really loved. I was getting paid a good wage. I was getting paid, and I was involved in music. So again, I thought, you know, I know this. And then, you know, we thought when we were working on the Beatles Anthology, it might last for 6 months. So 6 months wages, as we know, that's a good bit of money. You know, 6 months working in a job, especially in this industry, is a long time.
Yeah.
The job ended up lasting 5 years.
Wow.
So I got paid for 5 years, and I learned so much.
Wow.
I learned so much about how to put together.
Are you telling me that your first real, you'd done with your mate, you'd done like music videos, but your first real step into documentary, like as a music documentary land, was the Beatles Anthology? That was was that the first real sort of step into that?
The first job that I ever got credited as director, well, the Beatles Anthology was actually the second job that I got credited as director, and I was credited on the Beatles Anthology as series director and writer. Now, in the time that we're doing the Beatles Anthology, there would be periods where we'd make a program, a film, you know, because it became, I think it was six 1-hour television programs.
Yeah.
So when we finished one, we had to send it to Paul McCartney, George Harrison, and Ringo Starr, in Yoko Ono. John Lennon had already passed. I never met John Lennon. I met all the other guys, and I interviewed all the other guys. We had to send the rough cuts to be approved by the guys in the band.
Yeah.
So we're sitting there waiting, and when we were waiting to get feedback from the guys, we got offered the chance to make a documentary about the song Danny Boy. Oh, Danny Boy.
I know it well.
It's a fantastic song, you know, a mixture of Irish, Scottish, and English.
Yeah.
And so what they said was, the production said, look, you know, you're going to direct it. So in the middle of the Beatles Anthology, we went out and we made this documentary about Danny Boy. Now, when we did Danny Boy, we interviewed Shane MacGowan from the Pogues, Eric Clapton, Sinead O'Connor. We interviewed loads of people. I did all the interviews. So in the middle of the anthology, you know, the Danny Boy documentary came out when we were working on the anthology. That was my first credit as director, directed by Bob Smeaton.
Wow.
So even though so Danny Boy, that went on television, really, really successful. It was great. Then we were still working on the anthology. When the anthology came out, series director and writer Bob Smeaton, you know, Jeff Wanfor was very, you know, gracious. He said, look, you've done a lot of work on this. You should have a director's credit, series director. It's, you know, one of the best credits that you can get, and writer. So we finished the anthology. Now, when you finish something, as you know, it's like when you get a record finished, you don't, you know, finish the record, then it doesn't come out the next day. There's a period of time when they're getting everything in place. So we finished the anthology. Then it was going to be 2 or 3 months before it came out. I was back to doing nothing again. I had nothing to do. So I had this fear of like, God, what am I going to do? And, I'd done the anthology. So we were sort of like, spinning our wheels, waiting to see what happens next. When the anthology came out, and I was credited as, it was, who's this guy, Bob Smeaton. So I got a lot of work,
You
as
literally
I
had, you
worked.
literally, well, like, as far as one bands, you don't get any bigger, and the Beatles Anthology. Looking back on it now, I've watched it, and like as far as music documentaries go, it's something pretty special. It's something that, like, man, to have that as a calling card as your first sort of sort of major.
It's
Obviously, the
true.
Danny Boy thing comes out, but then, which is amazing to be working with people like Clapton and these are all amazing artists. But this is the bloody Beatles we're talking about. They don't
It was,
come any
Ciaran,
better than the Beatles, mate.
you know what it was like? That was almost like you've had a number one record and a number one album in the same week. Where do you go after that?
Yeah,
I knew at the time, I went from, we, the last gig that White Heat played, we played at Newcastle Mayfair, right? So that was the biggest crowd that we played to as a headlining act. We
yeah,
played to 4,000 people touring, supporting other people. So there we were on stage at Newcastle Mayfair. The next biggest crowd I got in front of when I went on stage was like 12 million people.
yeah.
When I went up at Madison Square Garden to collect the Grammy for the Beatles Anthology. I'm getting goosebumps now. I was
Yeah.
on stage at Madison Square Garden, right? But
Wow.
that came from being in the shipyards, from being in White Heat. This I'd got on stage not as a rock and roll singer,
Yeah.
not singing, jumping around. I
Yeah.
was on stage at Madison Square Garden, but it was that same. It happened the same way. It was hard work, determination in music, and I was on stage at Madison Square Garden, thanks to John, Paul, George, and Ringo.
Yeah.
It's a long way from Newcastle in the northeast of England
Yeah. Yeah.
to Madison Square Garden, and that was it. So then it became, I was very lucky because at the time when the Beatles Anthology came out, it was the first documentary of its kind where it was so wide ranging, and it was on TV and across in America. It was on ABC television. I
Yeah.
think it was on ABC in Australia.
Yeah.
ITV showed it here. So it was shown all around the world. So as you said, it was the best calling card that you could ever have. But you cannot get any higher than that. Now, the next big job I did after that, I made a Jimi Hendrix documentary. Like, I never met Hendrix. Hendrix had died, when I was a kid.
Yeah.
But my next big job was making a documentary, as director. Now I'm actually directing stuff.
How did that happen? Did they just went, well, this guy Bob Smeaton he's worked on the Beatles Anthology. Did Hendrix people contact you, or did you go out and make this happen? How did that come about?
What happened was, when the Beatles Anthology came out, the Hendrix people, they got in touch with Apple, who are the Beatles company,
Oh yeah.
and said, look, we would like to hire the guys who had done the Beatles Anthology. So guy called Chips Chipperfield, who was one of the producers on the anthology, and Neil Aspinall, who actually ran Apple. He said, okay, we'll make this documentary and Bob will direct it. So, so what do you do after the Beatles? Jimi Hendrix was a pretty good second one. So, and it was like
The greatest band that ever was. Probably the greatest guitar player that ever was.
But the big difference was now, when we started on the anthology, I had, this guy Jeff Onefour there. So I never had the pressure of, the book stops with me. When we did the Hendrix documentary, I was going in as a director. I wasn't starting it as director's assistant. I wasn't making the tea. I was the one who was saying, okay, do this, do that. I need this cameraman. And that was a big responsibility. And I was scared. I
Mm.
was really, really scared because suddenly, you're spending somebody's money. Somebody had invested a lot of money in this.
Yeah.
And it was, I had Chips and I had Neil there to sort of support me, but they weren't going to be, sitting in the edit suite having to make this thing work. And there was some nights when I had some really, really dark nights of the soul. I'd wake up and think, I cannot do this, but I said, calm down. Wake up in the middle of the night, worried, nervous. In the cold light of day, I'd wake up, okay, just went through. And then slowly but surely, the film started to come together and it started working. And I started to feel confident that it was working. And we won a Grammy for the Hendrix thing. So
Man.
now I'm on stage at the Staples Center in Los Angeles, picking up my second Grammy. Now, winning it for the Beatles was great, but there was a whole team. Jeff Wanford, he was director. I was
Yeah.
series director. We had a whole machinery around us.
Yeah.
When we did the Hendrix thing, the book stopped here. So
Yeah.
as great as it was when we won for the Beatles Anthology, I was a cog in a very big wheel.
Yeah.
Which I got front page of the newspapers, back in Newcastle, local boy makes good, me with a Grammy.
Yeah.
Hendrix, it was a bigger thing because I'd done it off my own back. I was brought on board right at the beginning and I saw it all the way through. And
What?
then,
How long are we talking the process of doing the Hendrix documentary? Because obviously you had to wade through a lot of footage, but you were interviewing what was your angle on the Hendrix documentary? Obviously you hadn't met him, but you were sort of going, how do I tell this story? Was that what your main, you wanted to tell
exactly,
the story?
yeah. Yeah, what happened was on the Hendrix film, it's like, rather than getting into too much, sort of detail, there are lots of different sort of documentaries that you can make, music films or art films, which is the stuff
Yeah.
I do. And you either, there's the ones that you make where there's a wealth of fantastic archive, so you use the archive to sort of help tell the story, or you've got access to the talent like we did with John, Paul, George and Ringo,
Yeah.
so they can tell the story. With the Hendrix film, we didn't have Jimi Hendrix, but what we had was the guy who had got in touch and said, make this film, he had acquired a concert which Jimi Hendrix had played at the Fillmore East, I think it was in 1968, 69, with a band that Jimmy had called the Band of Gypsies. They only played 2 gigs, I think. And he had the footage and he showed us this footage. It was really grainy black and white material, but it hadn't been seen. So that was this sort of main element to help us tell the story. We didn't have Jimi Hendrix, but all of his band members from when he was in the Jimi Hendrix Experience, Noel Redding, Mitch Mitchell, they were still alive. So we knew that, we could interview those guys. Billy Cox, who played bass in the Band of Gypsies, and Buddy Miles, who played drums, they were still alive.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of Hendrix's people were still alive. So we could interview them to fill in the gaps. So it was very different to the technique that we had when we did the Beatles. And also, when we did the Beatles, there was so much archive material because everywhere the Beatles went, they were filmed, always on the news, Shea Stadium. There was so much archive material. With Hendrix, there was less material, so we had to, widen the net a bit more. But it was, it was always about telling a story, and that's what we did. So we told the story of Jimi Hendrix and Band of Gypsies, and then that actually won a Grammy as well. So it was like, I've never ever got the hat trick.
Well, man,
Now,
you're still young, my friend. You're still young. Well, that is just like, to me, that's like, I've heard stories of, guys getting, for want of a better description, lucky on 1 Grammy, but to hit 2 in a
oh, really
row,
lucky. Yeah.
it's just like,
But
well, it's obviously down to a couple of things. One, from knowing you and even just hearing your backstory now, and obviously your understanding of music, and songwriting, and the not just the gravy that runs in musicians and the
yeah,
band.
exactly. Yeah.
You know the drill. You know how these how the magic that is music, the magic of the song, the magic of performance.
Yeah, yeah,
And you could
yeah.
understand that.
So I remember once, when we were, normally I would turn up and, say for instance, like if we're making a documentary, it's say about, who can say then, like the Who, right? So, Pete Townsend from the Who, he must have been interviewed how many times? A
Yeah.
million times, right? And he
Yeah.
must have been filmed loads of times. I'm sure, a lot of the times, he's interviewed by, music journalists who, know music, but they probably haven't been in a band, right?
Yeah.
So when I would turn up, I would always do the same thing. I would make sure that they knew I'd done the Beatles Anthology.
Yeah.
So straight away, it's like, hey, this guy, and I would mention Hendrix. I would mention I'd played in a band. So
Mm-hmm.
they knew that we would speak the same language.
Mm.
And I remember once I was working with Pete Townsend. So he was going through the multi-tracks, which is the tapes
Yeah.
from the Who's next album. So he was going through that. So I was like here, Pete was there, and he pressed he pressed the button, and it was Pete Townsend playing the bass guitar, because these were Pete Townsend's demo tapes
Yeah.
before he took them to the Who. So he would demo all his songs. He'd play bass, drums, and he'd sing. Take them to the Who. Roger would sing it. Keith Moon would play drums. John Entwistle would play bass. And Pete pressed the button, and he said, "I wanted to get my bass guitar to sound like that guy from Led Zeppelin." Straight away, I went, John Paul Jones. And so I could do that because I knew,
Yeah.
because I was a fan of Led Zeppelin, right?
Yeah.
Now, if that had been somebody else, Pete would have been sat there probably feeling a bit embarrassed that
Yeah.
he couldn't remember the name of the bass player. So as soon as I said John Paul Jones, Pete said, yeah, John Paul Jones. Now, when we edited that together, we cut out the bit where I said John Paul Jones. So Pete says, here, I wanted to get my bass guitar to sound like that guy from Led Zeppelin, John Paul Jones.
Yeah.
So Pete sees that. And when he watches it back, he says, that guy, he knew, he's done it to make me look good. And my job was to make those guys look good and make myself look good. But I could only do that through having this knowledge of music. Now, I still had to know how to make a film work, but it was storytelling. And when you're writing songs, what do? You tell a story. You have a beginning, you have a couple of verses, and maybe like a middle eight. So you're beginning, middle, and end. And that's what storytelling is. So it all came back to music, knowing about music. And it is, it's storytelling at the end of the day. And that's what
Absolutely.
and that's what we did.
Well, out of like, I'm gonna ask as a novice to this world. I've worked on movie soundtracks and stuff before, and I've been on movie sets. Can you tell me the difference? Just this, and this is a simple novice question. The main difference between a director and a producer on a documentary movie, or like the movie docos that you're making. What would you say the main differences are? What's the
Okay,
role of a producer?
right. Normally, I smile because I've locked horns with many producers in my time, but I've worked with some great producers. In film. So when you're making a film for the cinema, or when you're making a film for television, the producer's role is slightly different. But mainly, a producer's role is to get the money to actually make the film, and make sure that you as the director deliver what you're supposed to deliver. So normally, see on the project I'm working on now, right? I'm meant to be making, a Simple Minds documentary, which, hopefully, will still happen. But because of this, virus, they've had to cancel their gigs. So the gigs were meant to be a big part of the documentary. So can we still make the film, without being able to film the gigs, or will the virus and canceling the shows become part of the documentary? At the start of the project, I'll sit down with the producer and he say, okay, what's your idea for the film, Bob? And I will say, or they might already have a commission, for to make the film, but they need a director. So they've gotten, so we know that we're going to be making a documentary about Simple Minds. So the producer will say to me, how do you see the film? And I'll say, okay, I would like to do this, 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 and this. This is a story that I want to tell.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll say, how much money have I got to tell that story? What's the budget? And
Mm-hmm.
he'd say, okay, you've got this amount of money. So you've got X amount of pounds. How are you going to spend that money? Okay, I'm going to spend 20% on filming stuff. I'm going to go out with a camera crew. I might film some stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to be part of my budget. Part of the budget is going to be buying an archive footage. I'm going to need to buy some footage from 1986 or whatever. Use that. This amount of money.
Can I just stop you there? When you say you're buying archive footage, who owns the rights to that? Are you buying that off record companies or people like Getty Images, or who do you buy that stuff off?
Well, generally you buy it from the broadcasters who might have used it for television programs.
So you got to go to
the
the BBC or ITV or whoever shot the stuff.
Yeah. So say for instance, what's that big music show that was on in Australia? Countdown or something.
Oh yeah, Countdown in Australia.
Countdown. Yeah. Say for instance, Simple Minds, they did a performance on Countdown back in the early 80s, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now, you can go on to YouTube and you see Simple Minds on Countdown, but you've got to get, the master material. You cannot just rip it off and then use it. Well, some people do, and then you get into trouble. We always do it, it's always done legitimately. So, your archive person will get in touch with the people at Countdown or the people that, own the material, which is probably ABC Television, and say, okay, we would like to use 1 minute of Simple Minds on the Countdown show. And they will turn around and say, okay, we're going to charge you 8,000 Australian dollars for that, which is probably about, 4,000, 5,000 quid.
Mm-hmm.
So you pay them the money, they give you that material, master material, which you drop into your documentary. So that's what you do. So you buy it from, like you say, Getty Images, and Getty Images now own all the BBC's archive. At one time, you would go to the BBC and they would sort of deal out, but now you've got to go through Getty Images. So any Top of the Pops performances, Old Grey Whistle Test, you've got to license that material for whatever amount of time, and whether it's going to be used online, in cinema, on television, and there's a rate card for different ways that you're going to use it. So get back to what the producer does. So you'll sit down, with your producer and work out how you're going to spend the budget. And you say, right, okay, so he all the time so you're forever going back and saying, I think I'm going to need an extra day's filming here. Mm-hmm. So in order to do that, we might have to lose, 1 minute of archive. So you work out how you're going to spend the money. And the producer, a good producer will always say to you, not a problem, we'll make it happen. A bad producer will say, you can't have that, Bob. And I say, come on. And I can be, grumpy sometimes. And, but, it's always about making the best film possible. And the producer also, I will say, right, okay, so I want to interview. Normally, if you're doing something with Simple Minds, the band, they are on board anyway. So you know that you're going to film them. So you've got Jim Kerr, you've got Charlie Burchill. But you might want to interview the guy who, produced one of the albums. So your producer, excuse me, he will possibly get, either he will or somebody else will chase up, your other contributors and say, look, Bob's making this documentary about Simple Minds. The band are on board. Will you be interviewed? Yes. When can we do it? And your production manager will set up, we're going to film with you in a month's time. We're going to come to Los Angeles and we're going to film. So that's what the producer do. He will take care of the money, make sure that you're not overspending, and make sure that you actually deliver what you said that you're going to do. Now, one of my strengths is generally going into a project, I can pretty much see the film in my head. I know it sounds like a bit bullshitty and like, oh crap.
You
But
have
it's
the
like
vision.
you hearing
You
it,
have a good vision before you start of what you want.
good vision, yeah. You think, right, how will this work? So you picture it in your head, and I would generally make like a treatment. So I'll write out what the film is, and when I'm working on that project, I will keep referring back to that treatment, because that will be what the broadcaster or whoever is going to be paying for this is seen, and you've got to deliver what you. It's like if you have to turn up and you're going to, play a corporate gig, right? And you say, I'm going to turn up and I'm going to write a song, and everybody in the audience is going to participate. And at the end of our show, we're going to record a song. We're going to do this. And you turn along, and that's what you do. You deliver what you've said that you're going to do. Now, if you turn up and you just strum a few songs and tell a bunch of jokes, at the end of the day, people are going to turn around and say, hey, Ciaran, you said that you were going to do A, B, C, and D, but you didn't. You're going to get into trouble. So I'm the same. I've got to deliver what I've said I'm going to, so it's a producer's job to make sure that I'm going to deliver what I said I would. Sometimes, people die. So you say, oh, we're going to interview this guy, and you put it in your treatment, and then he dies.
Yeah.
So you couldn't interview him. Or you might say that we're going to tell this part of the story, but it doesn't really work out. But instead of telling this part, you tell that part. There is still, it's like, when you walk on stage, you know that you're going to play certain songs, but you might say, hang on, tonight I'm not going to play that song. I'm going to play this song instead. And you might put an extra verse in or an extra chorus. So there is a bit of flexibility, but you've got to, if you've got to deliver what you say you're going to deliver.
So working with, like, I can only imagine working with, you're working with a lot of big names here, the Beatles, Elton John, the Who, Floyd, Doors, and all of the Queen, all of these people you've worked with. How much creative control do you have? Obviously, you're involved in every little detail from start to finish of and your writing, and you're you're working with the artists themselves, the people that have been surrounded around these artists, and there's a mountain of content that you have to pull it all together at the very, very end when you're sitting down in that edit suite, and or you've waded through all of the footage you've got. How much creative control do you have of when you've started that vision at the very, very start? Is the producer still coming in at the end of the edit, or one of the final drafts of the edit, and has he still got a point? Can he still make a point and go, Bob, I don't like that line there, or I don't like the way you've linked that part to that part, or do you fight your cause for your creative vision at that stage? Are you still flexible at that point? Because this is, I can only imagine. I'm a creator myself as a songwriter, and even just those 3-4 minutes of writing a song, and you're working with a music producer, that's just 2 people or 3 people. You might be in a band, there might be 5 or 6. You're dealing with superstar bands, and then their managers, their managers, the guy who's paying for it all or pulling it all together. How do you manage that level of stress and also hold on to the creative vision of what you have?
Well, I think I've been really, really lucky, right? Normally, I've had producers who have came in, I always say to them, stay out of the edit until I can show you something that resembles a program. And I'll always say at the start of a project, there's going to be 2 people in the edit suite, me and the editor. I'm not going to have 3 people in the edit suite. I've had that happen once on one job where the producer came in. It was a nightmare. I walked out and said, look, if you want to direct this, you direct it. After a day in there, they realized they weren't a director. I came back in and I finished the job. So I would normally hold off. Normally for to make like a 1-hour film, you've probably got 6 weeks in the edit. That's from start to sort of finish. And I'm always well prepared, and I'm in the edit suite every day. I'm not I'm not like a director who will leave the material and say to the editor, put something together. I know what I want to do. So I would always say, wait until I've got something that you can look at, something that resembles a program. Because what you want to happen is, anybody that comes in, for to look at it, you want them to watch it like they're watching a film. You know, you don't want to have gaps in there, and you don't want to have to be explaining what's going to go there. So
Yeah.
if they can sit there and if they start watching it like they're watching, you know, a television program or they're watching a film, they get into that mindset. If they're watching something knowing that they've got the power to change stuff, like I say, I've had good experiences with producers. Now, on my next job, it might be different. So, you know, so they'll watch stuff through and they will make a comment. And you know, if they've got a good comment, I would take it on board every time. And I will also, there's been occasions in the past where you know, where you're in an edit suite, you know, I might have put something together, right? So, you know, me and the editor, we know the story really well because we're telling it. But I'm thinking, hang on, when somebody else watches this, will they understand what's just happened? Is the message clear? So I will get the runner who makes the coffee to come into the edit suite and I'll say, watch this, you know, watch this 10 minutes. Then I'm going to ask you some questions. So I will show them 10 minutes of the film and say, okay, what's just happened? And they'll say, oh, well, you've just explained that, you know, Jimi Hendrix sacked the bass player because this, and this. And I'll say, all right, okay, that's great. You've understood it because I know the story, but will somebody else understand it? So, you know, everything I hope makes sense. And then the producer, you know, they will come in and they'll watch it and generally they'll say, that's really great. And also it's generally a bit long. You know, it might be, if it's a 60-minute film, it might be 70 minutes long. So, you know, you've still got time to edit and shorten stuff. I always think shorter is better. I always want things to be more, you know, concise. So they'd come in, have a look at it, and I'll say, okay, I'll take on board their comments, but it's never like pages and pages of stuff. I remember one example. I did a film called, it was originally called The Beatles in the Studio, right? Which was about the Beatles recording all their albums. So, and we had this guy, and it was being made for the BBC, and it was called The Beatles in the Studio. And the exec from the BBC came in at the end and he said, I think it's really great, Bob. I don't like the title. Now, I'd been living with it called The Beatles in the Studio for a long time, right? And actually, this award here, it was partly to do with making that. So he turned around and said, I think it should be called The Beatles on Record. I said, no, I don't like it. But then I thought about it and I thought, you know what it is? He's 100% right. The next day I phoned him and said, look, you're right. It's better called The Beatles on Record rather than The Beatles in the Studio. Because he said, The Beatles in the Studio sounds a bit dry. And he was right. He was 100% right. And also, so that sort of thing, and make you think, oh, right, he's right. But sometimes if I think somebody has said something that I think's wrong, I will fight my corner and I generally win, you know. But if someone has made a suggestion and it's right, it's going to make the film better, you know. So I would change, oh yeah, or people might watch it and think, oh, you know, that guy is really good who you've got in the film. Have you got any more of him? And I'm used to hearing him on the screen talking all the time. So I've heard all these jokes.
Yeah.
All right, I'll go back into my rushes and see, is there any more of that guy? And I'll put a bit more in. But, you know, generally, it's the director's, it sounds really wanky, it's a director's artistic vision to deliver what he sees in your head, and then you see it on the screen. And the producer's job is to make sure that you deliver what you said you are going to, and that you don't spend, you know, over the budget. And, you know, so generally, you know, I've had good experiences, but the problems start when you've got a lot of producers. When you do things for America, say, for instance, like I made a Jimi Hendrix film for ABC for a series in America called American Masters. You have a lot of producers. So you get a lot of people coming at you with different comments. And that's when it gets, because one person's saying, I don't like this bit. Someone else is saying, I really love that bit. So it's like, at the end of the day, hang on, I'm the referee here. I get the casting vote.
Yeah.
So not everybody, if 6 people all say that doesn't work and I think it works, the 6 people, they're generally right. But if 3 people like something and 3 people don't, you know, I've got the casting vote. I'm going to say, okay, this is the way that will work. So that's how, but I've had, you know, so that's what a producer does. They will make sure that you deliver what you say that you're going to, deliver,
Great.
and within budget.
Right. Well, before we finish up, I've got to ask you about some of these artists. And I can only imagine turning up at recording studios or wherever you're interviewing these artists. Some of them will be lovely, I would imagine. Some of them will be tough work. Knowing a musician, I'm a musician of many years. I know how musicians can be sometimes. And of who has been the one that you've really, one or two really bonded with on a personal level? Is there anybody that sort of that you're almost like twins? Your souls are connected in some way. It's just some of warmth.
I think that, what I learned sort of early on through watching other people work is that, I am there to do a job, right? Mm-hmm. They are the talent. And what I've noticed is that, there's a reason why Elton John is Elton John. There's a reason why Paul McCartney is Paul McCartney. There's a reason why, the Spice Girls were the Spice Girls. They've got what they call now the X Factor, right? Mm-hmm. And they've got that thing. I haven't got that. And having been in a band, I know what they had that's made them. Sometimes people slip through it and become famous with a minimal amount of talent. Mm-hmm. Now, these big stars, they've got it right. So I go in there never thinking I'm going to become friends. What I want to do, I respect them 100%, right? Mm-hmm. They've got something that I thought I had back in the day, but I didn't have it. I wasn't good enough to be Elton John or to be Mick Jagger or to be Joe Strummer. Mm-hmm. So I always go in there giving them 100% respect. And also all I ask for in return is respect what I do. Because if we both respect each other, we're going to be able to get on. And, the ones that, I made 3 Elton John films. And part of that was because Elton liked me. It's like when you go in a room, people want to say, oh, Ciaran's here. Yeah. Great. He's going to be good crack. And you're very, no, but not only good crack, you're very professional and you're going to deliver, right? Yeah. So that's what you want really, you don't get to spend a lot of time in these guys, atmosphere, whatever the word is. So you want to get you got to become friends for that short period of time. But once I say cut, okay, guys, and we leave, I know that I've walked out of their lives. Now, they're going to probably forget about me, but I will always remember them, So I don't ever think that. I think it's a dangerous road to go down to think that I'm going to become Paul McCartney's mate. Now, when I see Paul McCartney walking through like Soho, I say, Paul, you come across, hey, Bob, how are you doing? I like your new haircut. Yeah. Because Paul McCartney's great like that. But I'm not his mate. I'm not his friend. I'm not going to ring him up next week and say, hey, Paul, can you do us a favor? Can you sign this album sleeve? It's my granny's birthday. So I think it's like I always respect them. Yeah. And I always want back is that they respect you. And I think that, like when I work with Pete Townsend from The Who, Pete is, he can be difficult. He's still an angry man. Yeah. But I love that because that's the guy that I saw on stage. Yeah. He won't get fooled again, right? So he was exactly like I expected him. So, and Pete was a bit, we spent 3 days filming with Pete, which is a lot of time because these guys, time is very precious. At the end of the second day, we hadn't, during the first day, he was a bit grumpy. And at the start of the second day, I thought it was a good chance that he could. Actually, all this is in my book. This story's in my book here. Ah, yes. So I thought at the start of the second day, I thought he might. I don't think he enjoyed the first day's filming. So I thought it was a good chance he could pull the plug on me. So he turned up at the start of the second day and said, before we start, Bob, can I have a word with you? Now, Pete Townsend's he's like 6 foot. I'm 6 foot. Pete's probably 6'3", right? And he's an imposing character, right? You've seen what he does to his guitars. I thought he was going to do that to me. So Pete pulls me to one side, takes me in this little like studio area and says, look, yesterday, he says, I'm sorry about yesterday. I was feeling really nervous. Wow. He says, no, I know that you're working really hard and I love you for that. He says, come here, give me a big hug. And he said, come on, let's do good work. Now, this was Pete Townsend telling me that he apologizing to me because he was a bit grumpy, but it was because he was nervous. And he said, I love you because I know how hard you're working to make this work.
Wow.
That's all you want. And with Pete, for the next 2 days, he was absolutely brilliant. And I always say, people say, who's the person that you've enjoyed working with most? I would say Pete Townsend, because he was honest and he respected what I had to do. I respected what he had to do. If he didn't like something which I asked him to like do, he would say no. And that's all you want. You know, that's the thing that you want. You respect them because you love them. Because generally, you know, I'll turn jobs down because I thought I cannot really go into a situation if I'm not, you know, you needn't be a fan of the music that of the sort of subject, but you've got to respect them, you know, and that's generally, that's the way I like to sort of work. You know, what can I find, you know, within this story, or, you know, about this person that I really respect or that I admire. And if you can find that, that's the essence that you take in, because, you know, you don't want to spend, you know, also if we, you know, like say for instance, this little sort of section here, right? We talk for an hour, right? Now, if I had to edit this and I had to spend 6 weeks editing it, I would spend 6 weeks looking at your face.
Yeah.
Now, if I didn't like you, I like you. You know, you're a great guy. So I'm always happy to see you. Now, if I've spent, you know, four days filming somebody, and then I've got to spend 6 weeks looking at their face in the edit suite, if I don't like them and if I don't respect what they do, I'm back in the shipyards again.
Yeah.
I'm doing something that I don't really like. How can I get out of this as quick as I can? So I go in there and, you know, I enjoy the person. I like their talent, you know. Isn't it great the way that they've been able to do that? It's great. So I enjoy the process. It's difficult sometimes. So it's that mutual respect. I respect what they do because they're really talented. They've got to respect my job.
Yeah, well, look, man, you're obviously very, very good at what you do, and it sounds like it's an inherent gift that you have. Obviously, there's a music side to this, but there's a more people skill that you have as well, to be able to constantly you know, work with these high level artists. And that's one thing, but obviously your reputation goes before you, but secondly, then to be able to make successful work every time and time again over many years is a credit to you and your skills of which I'm sure there are many. With regards to music, man, because it started obviously in Newcastle and the bands, and you have a love. I can tell you still have a passion for these artists that you're working for and the music itself. Why I know you've probably diversified a little bit. What is it about music in general and these people that you're working about and the joy of music? What is it that is attracting? Because I'm in music 35 years, and I'm still dumbfounded by the way it makes me feel and the magic as a writer, as a performer. And I know I've had you on stage with me before singing songs. I know you have a passion for music, but what is it about it? Tell me why is it music? Why is it? And after all of these years from the you left Newcastle and you're still working to this day with legendary acts. You're working on a project with Simple Minds at the minute. What is it about the music industry? What is it about music in general that attracts you?
I don't think it's the music industry as much. I think that I was burnt, you know, by the music industry, by being, you know, signed and then dropped by the lip. But I think it's just something about music. You know, I can hear a song, like, you know, my favorite song of all time is Waterloo Sunset by the Kinks, right? And I always say that. Now, what I always do, I very rarely listen to Waterloo Sunset by the Kinks. It's almost like a special treat, which I will like eat every now and again. And sometimes I'll hear it off chance. I'll just hear it I'll be driving in the car and it'll just come on the radio. And it's just like, you cannot see the music. you cannot see it and you cannot touch it. It's just there. And it's, I think we're all hearing it. Do we all hear the same thing? When you hear Waterloo Sunset, do you hear exactly the same thing that I hear? I don't know. You might hear it different, the way it's processed in here and in here. And for me, I hear the song and it's just, it never fails. It's sometimes it won't move me like it normally does, but other times it will. And I think with music, there's still that, it's like there's this endless pot which is full of stuff, and I'm never going to get to the bottom of it. There's always something new. Even there might be like a new song. Like I love at the minute, I love Lana Del Rey, right?
Yeah.
And I love it. I love her songs, and I'm as excited, when I'm running and I've got the headphones in, to hear, a new, Lana Del Rey song as I was years ago to hear a new Elvis Costello song or a new Led Zeppelin song. It's just that thing of like, surprising you. And whether you're feeling good or whether you're feeling bad, it's always there. It's always either in the background or in the foreground. And it's you cannot see it, you cannot touch it. It's something which is always there. So it's a question that I couldn't answer, but I know that it still works for me on so many levels. Watching music play live, I'll go and see a band, and even if it's like, 3 guys on stage and 4 guys in the audience, there's still that excitement there. And I think it's something that people, a lot of people, we've stuck with it. It's got us through and we've made a living out of it. And I'm still involved in music, even though I now make, music documentaries. I still play a bit and sing a bit, but I'm not going out and doing gigs for it. We stuck with it. For some people, it's something which they'll put on at parties or, when they're doing the dishes or they're doing the cleaning up or cooking. With people, like you and I, it's our lives. And I couldn't imagine my life without it. It's almost like it's the girlfriend that I've had rows with and we're falling out, but we always get back together again. And we always surprise each other,
Yeah.
It's a gift that keeps on giving. And when I eat the top of the banana bread, she gets angry with me, but we make up again,
Man. Well, thank you, my friend. You are a gentleman and an amazing talent, and it's a pleasure to know you. And I hope we get to hang out in Sydney when all of this coronavirus malarkey is all left and gone. We'll have a bit of a yarn down under again, like we've done in the past. Before you go, hold that book up till I get a look at it, and everybody that's watching this. And tell me the name of this book, Bob Smeaton.
Right, it's Bob Smeaton, From Benwell Boy to 46th Beatle and Beyond. Now, Benwell is the place where I was born in Newcastle. And the reason why it's called the 46th Beatle, I'll keep this story short. When we're working on the anthology, there's this thing which has gone on for years as to, who is the 5th Beatle? Is it George Martin? Is it Yoko Ono? Is it Neil Aspinall? And we were sitting around chatting, and Jeff Wanfor, who we're working with, he said, "Oh, I must be the 5th." Jeff, he said, "I must be the 5th Beatle now." And I said, "Oh, hang on a minute. So what would I be then?" And he says, "Oh, you'd probably be the 46th or something." And I thought, "Oh, great. Well, the 46th, it's not bad." So
well,
there you
look,
go.
man, look, for all of the work you've done, man, to be able to say, there's very few people on the planet has lifted Grammys, my friend, to have lifted 2 Grammys and 3 times Emmy nominated. Did any, and I know probably of all of these awards, and I can tell you're still a proud Geordie from Newcastle. Was it still, when you go home to Newcastle, does it still feel like home? Are those moments of spending at home, is that you're still a proud Geordie?
Yeah, well, it's still, that's what makes you, like, if I'd been born in like Sheffield,
yeah,
I wouldn't have worked in the shipyards, and that's what made me what I am. That's still home. It's where we come from. It's like, you go home. Where do you go home to? You go back to Ireland. When I go home, I go back. When I was in Sydney, I went back home. I came back to the UK, but home was, Newcastle. That's where it was. And that's still home. When I go up there, I still, you know, I drive across that bridge, like that famous bridge, and it's like I'm home, you know. When the people are, I know it's a cliche, but the people are great, are really friendly, and you know, and that's where I'm from. You know, I didn't, you know, my life started there, and there's a good chance that it'll end there. You know, that's, you know, you go full circle, really.
Yeah. Well, man, God bless you. Long may you reign and continue making these documentaries, my friend. And there's many a musician and band that has benefited from knowing Bob Smeaton. God bless you, man. Thank
I'll
you so
benefit from knowing them.
much.
Great.
Cheers, my friend.
Cheers, Ciaran.
Thank
Stay in
you.
touch.